My sister, a pilot, called me mid-flight. "Is your husband home?" I said, "Yeah, he's right here," but she whispered, "I'm looking at him right now, boarding a flight to Paris with another woman." Then I heard the front door open behind me. I didn't turn around right away. I couldn't. My sister's voice was still echoing in my ear, that rigid whisper she only used in the cockpit when something had gone terribly wrong. "They just boarded my flight to Paris." I stared at the muted TV in front of me, every sound in the house collapsing into a thick, unnatural silence. My husband, Mark, was supposed to be 10 feet behind me on the couch. He'd been there all morning, half asleep, scrolling through his phone while ESPN murmured in the background. I had watched him walk into the living room with a mug of coffee. I had asked him twice if he wanted breakfast. He had answered. I had heard his voice. But now my sister, a senior first officer with Delta, was telling me she had just watched him, my husband, walk down an airport jet bridge with another woman. A woman she described as comfortable, like she belonged next to him, like she had done it before. I finally forced myself to turn around. The couch was empty. The coffee mug sat on the table, still steaming. His phone was gone. And the front door, the one I knew had been shut a minute ago, was cracked open just enough to let in a ribbon of cold November air from our driveway in Charlotte. I held the phone tighter. "Sarah, what does she look like?" she exhaled sharply. Long dark hair, tan coat. She was holding his arm like they were on a honeymoon. He didn't look nervous, he looked settled. Like this was normal. I pressed my free hand against my chest because it felt like something inside me had fallen and hit the floor. "Are you sure it's him? Did you actually see his face?" "I wouldn't call you if I wasn't damn sure," she whispered. I'm walking to the flight deck now. They're in 4A and 4B. He had his passport in his hand. Passport, Paris, another woman, none of it made sense. Mark hadn't left the country in years. His passport lived in a drawer in our bedroom under old utility bills. I had cleaned out that drawer last week. It was there. It was definitely there. "Wait," I said, my voice cracking. "The door just opened. I thought he was home." I swear he was just here. A strange rustling sound came from the hallway, fast, clumsy, something sliding against the floor. I stepped toward the noise, my heart pounding so hard it shook my vision. The air in the house felt wrong, unsettled, like the walls were holding their breath. "Get somewhere safe," my sister said. "I don't like this." I pushed the bedroom door open. The drawer, the one that held our documents, was half open. Paper scattered across the carpet. The passport slot was empty, but what froze me wasn't the drawer. It was the cracked window above our bed. The one Mark always kept locked because he hated drafts. The one now pushed outward, screen sliced cleanly at the bottom as if someone had planned the cut, like they had rehearsed it. I stumbled back and whispered into the phone, "Sarah, someone's been in here." Before she could respond, footsteps echoed from the hallway, slow, deliberate, moving toward me. Not Mark's, someone else. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. And then a voice, not his, came from just beyond the doorway. "Where is it? He said it would be right here." I clutched the doorknob with shaking fingers. This wasn't just infidelity. It was something else, something darker. Something Mark should never have dragged me into. "Sarah," I whispered, "I think my husband lied about everything." The footsteps grew closer. Before all of this, before the phone call, before the open door, before I heard a stranger's voice inside my house, I used to believe Mark was the safest person I'd ever known. That belief didn't come from some romantic ideal. It came from the way my life had shaken apart long before I met him. 3 years ago, I was still recovering from losing my job at a tech company in Raleigh after a supervisor quietly pushed me out for reporting his harassment. I had fought it, filed complaints, tried to stay visible, but HR buried everything. The day I cleared out my desk, I remember standing in the parking garage, wishing anyone would say, "I've got you." But no one ever did. I spent months drifting between interviews, temp work, and long stretches of silence where my phone only rang for spam calls. That was when Mark entered my life. I met him at a bar in Chapel Hill while grabbing a drink with a friend after yet another interview that went nowhere. He slid onto the bar stool next to me like he already belonged there. He had that easy confidence, the kind that made you think he understood things you didn't even know how to say yet. When I told him I'd lost my job, he didn't minimize it or ask what I did wrong. He just said, "Some people don't know how to treat value when they see it." No man had ever said anything like that to me. He started showing up everywhere, offering to cook when I was too exhausted to make dinner, bringing coffee before interviews, fixing things around my apartment I didn't even know were broken. A month in, he gave me a spare key without asking for one back. He told me he wanted me to feel secure, that he knew what it was like to build from nothing. It wasn't until later that I realized how calculated that sounded. But at the time, it felt like rescue. 6 months after we met, I got a stable job in Charlotte, and he moved in with me to make things easier. He said he worked remotely in logistics consulting, and because the pandemic had normalized everything being online, I didn't question why he never had coworkers calling or why his schedule shifted constantly. He'd disappear for a day or two sometimes, claiming last-minute visits to clients in Greensboro or Atlanta. When I'd ask for details, he'd brush my hair back and say, "You don't need the stress of my boring work." The truth was, I didn't want another man to leave. So I let his half-answers sit. The second pivotal moment, the one I never connected until that morning, happened the night I thought someone had tried to break into our house. It was around 2 a.m. in early September. I heard the side gate slam and heavy footsteps along the backyard gravel. I woke Mark, and he went outside with nothing but a flashlight in hand. He came back 10 minutes later and said it was probably a raccoon or some kid cutting through. He held me until I stopped shaking, but something in his shirt smelled like soil, and there was a small tear along the seam of his jacket sleeve. When I asked what happened, he said, too quickly, "I tripped." I let that explanation sit too. Now, standing in that bedroom with papers scattered around me and someone else's footsteps coming closer, all those small moments rearranged themselves into a picture I had been too afraid to see. Whatever Mark had been protecting me from, or hiding me from, it wasn't raccoons. And it wasn't boring consulting work. It had been creeping toward me for months, and now it was inside my house. The man's footsteps paused just beyond the cracked bedroom door. I didn't move. My sister was still on the line, whispering frantically, "Say something, are you okay? Do you need me to call the police?" But I couldn't answer her. My throat had tightened to the point where any sound felt like it would give away my position. Through the slit between the door and its frame, I saw the edge of a black jacket and a gloved hand brushing against the wall like he was feeling his way through my home. I backed up one step at a time until the heel of my foot hit the base of the dresser. The room felt too small, the air too thick, my heartbeat too loud. "I'm calling now," Sarah whispered. "Stay on the phone. Lock yourself somewhere." I forced myself to inhale, then another. I wasn't the same woman who had crumbled in a parking garage after losing her job. I wasn't the woman who let half-answers soothe her because she was too tired to dig deeper. Something inside me, something that had been dormant since long before Mark, switched on. I grabbed the metal pole of the detachable closet rod, slid it free, and stepped back as quietly as I could. It wasn't a weapon, not really, but it was something solid to put between myself and whoever this was. The man stepped fully into view. He was tall, mid-40s maybe, with a close-shaved head and a dark windbreaker that looked tactical. He moved with precision, scanning the room as though searching for a target rather than a thing. When his eyes hit the open drawer on the floor, he muttered, "He said he left it here." "Where the hell?" my breath caught. He wasn't surprised by the break-in. He wasn't improvising. He'd been told where to look. Mark's voice echoed in my memory, "You don't need to stress about my work." I tightened my grip on the closet rod. Suddenly the man froze. I watched his head tilt slightly. He had heard something, maybe the soft vibration of my phone against my palm, maybe the thud of my pulse. He turned toward the closet. I didn't think. I swung. The metal rod struck the edge of the door frame with a violent clang, missing him by inches. He leapt back, startled but fast, his hand darting toward his waistband. A gun. He had a gun. I bolted. I didn't wait to see if he fired. I crashed through the bathroom, slammed the door, locked it, and pressed my weight against it. My sister was shouting, "Are you safe? Are you safe?" And all I could say was, "No." I heard the man's boots hitting the hallway floor in heavy beats, then a pause, then a rattle at the bathroom handle. "Where is it?" he demanded. His voice was steady, almost bored. "Your husband said it would be here." "I don't know what you're talking about," I screamed. "You do," a beat of silence. "You just don't know you do." He hit the door once, twice, harder each time. The wood vibrated against my back. The old version of me, the one who tolerated confusion, who let fear explain things away, would have frozen. But something raw rose in me instead, a kind of anger that made everything sharpen. I opened the bathroom window, kicked out the screen, and crawled onto the sloped roof over the porch. Cold air slapped my face. My legs trembled as I eased down the side lattice and dropped into the bushes. I didn't look back. Sirens wailed in the distance. My sister must have already reached 911. I sprinted barefoot across the yard, through the gate, and into the street, where a neighbor's porch light flicked on at the sight of me. I didn't stop until I reached their steps. As they helped me inside, hands shaking around a blanket, one thought dug deeper than everything else. Mark hadn't just lied about where he was. He'd lied about who he was and what he had hidden inside my home. And I was done being the woman who waited for answers. I was going to find them myself. The police swept through my house in a controlled rush, flashlights slicing through corners, weapons drawn, boots thudding against the hardwood. I sat on my neighbor's couch, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like fabric softener and stale coffee, answering the same questions over and over. Had I seen the man's face? Had I heard his name? Did I know what he was searching for? Every answer was no. Every answer made me feel smaller, angrier, more determined. But the real blow came when one of the officers, a woman with sharp eyes and a steady voice, approached me with a strange expression. Not pity. Not confusion, recognition. "Ma'am," she said quietly, "we ran the registration on your address. Your husband listed the property as a secondary residence." I blinked. "Secondary, no. This is our home." She hesitated, then continued. "He also listed a primary address in Durham, under a different name." For a second, I couldn't process the words. They felt too big, too sharp, like they didn't belong to my life. "A different name," I repeated. She nodded. "Mark Harrison doesn't exist. Not legally. The ID number he uses belongs to a man who died 2 years before you met him." I felt the room tilt. The officer steadied my shoulder, but her voice kept going, unraveling the world I thought I lived in. "Your husband, whatever his real identity is, has at least 2 active aliases. Possibly more. And based on what you described, it sounds like he may be involved in interstate financial crimes or document trafficking. The man who broke into your home likely wasn't random." My mouth went dry. "Financial crimes, document trafficking, aliases. He told me he worked in logistics," I whispered. She gave a weary half-smile. "Sometimes that's exactly what they call it." I shook my head slowly, as if movement could force the truth back into place. Mark laughed too hard at sitcom reruns. Mark grilled ribs on summer weekends. Mark held me when I cried after job interviews went nowhere. That Mark couldn't be someone with stolen identities and men with guns looking for something he'd hidden. But he was. He absolutely was. Then the officer handed me a small evidence bag. Inside was something they'd found in the bedroom drawer, the same one the intruder had been rummaging through. At first it looked like a crumpled sheet of paper, folded twice. But when I held it up to the light, I saw it wasn't paper at all. It was a boarding pass, Paris, departing that morning. Seat 4C, my husband had a third seat reserved next to him. "Wait," I said, staring at the document as the realization wrapped icy fingers around my spine. "He booked 3 seats. My sister saw him in 4A and 4B with the woman, but this is 4C. Why would he need a third seat?" The officer shrugged. "Some people buy extra space on international flights." But my gut told me that wasn't it. That wasn't it at all. I turned the boarding pass over. There was a handwritten note on the back. A short one, almost a command. "If it's not in the drawer, check the house." She knows where it is. My breath caught. Me, they thought I knew something Mark had hidden. Something he had tied to me without telling me. The officer's radio crackled and she stepped away. I sat frozen, staring at the message, feeling the weight of those words settle into my bones. Mark hadn't just left me for another woman. Mark had set me up. He had used me for something dangerous enough that men with guns were now tearing through my house. And then my phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. All it said was, "Do not talk to the police. I'll explain everything when we land. Paris." He was texting me from the plane, or someone was. I stared at the text until the screen dimmed and my reflection looked back at me, wide-eyed, hollow, someone I barely recognized. The police were still moving through the house next door, radios crackling, boots pounding. My neighbor poured me a glass of water I didn't touch. My sister was somewhere over the Atlantic with my husband, my not-husband, just a few rows behind her, or maybe already speaking to flight attendants about turbulence, pretending he wasn't the reason my life had just detonated. I told the officers I needed air. Outside, the night felt cold and metallic, like the world had shifted into another register. Every breath stung. The message replayed in my head, "Do not talk to the police. I'll explain everything when we land." No apology, no denial, no shock about a man breaking into our home with a gun. Just control, direct, confident, like he still assumed he could tell me what to do. The woman he was traveling with, she wasn't random. She wasn't a fling. She was part of whatever this was. Something inside me, something sharp and long suppressed, snapped cleanly. I wasn't waiting for explanations. I wasn't letting him land in Paris and decide what I deserved to know. And I wasn't going to be the terrified woman who hid behind police tape while her life was rewritten by men who moved in shadows. If Mark, if whatever his real name was, had used me, then it meant I had leverage. I just had to figure out what it was. I walked back into my house once the police cleared the scene. They wanted me to stay elsewhere for the night, but I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to see what he'd left behind. The mess in the bedroom was worse now, everything overturned from the intruder's frantic search. My hands shook as I slid my fingers under the dresser, then under the mattress. Nothing. I checked the closet shelf, the vents, the lining of his coat pockets. Still nothing. But then I remembered something from weeks ago, a moment I'd dismissed. Mark kneeling in the backyard, repairing a loose sprinkler head, even though it had never worked right since we moved in. Dirt under his nails that night, the tear in his jacket, the smell of soil, not a raccoon, not a kid cutting through. He had been burying something. I grabbed my neighbor's flashlight and walked barefoot into the yard, the grass cold and wet. The sprinkler head sat crooked in the soil. I knelt and pried it loose. Underneath was a plastic cylinder, capped tightly. The kind used to protect documents from moisture. My heart slammed against my ribs. Inside were 4 passports, each with a different name but all with Mark's face. And beneath them, folded meticulously, was a sheet of paper. Not a boarding pass, not instructions. A ledger, numbers, dates, transfers, international banks, offshore accounts. Money moving in and out in precise amounts. He had been funneling something, maybe laundering, maybe transporting. And the totals, they were into the millions. I had been living with someone conducting crimes large enough to destroy entire lives. No wonder men with guns were looking for it. No wonder he'd told them I knew where it was. He needed someone else to take the fall if things collapsed. A new message buzzed on my phone. "Delete what you found. Do not show anyone. We'll fix this together." He knew. He always knew more than he should. But this time, so did I. I didn't delete anything. I photographed every page, every passport, every number. I backed it all up to a cloud account he didn't have access to. Then I zipped the cylinder closed and put it back exactly where I found it. Because if I was going to confront him, I needed him to believe I was still in the dark. The old me would have collapsed under the weight of this. The new me, the one he created by lying, hiding, and putting a gunman in my hallway, was already planning the next step. He wanted to land in Paris and explain. Fine. I'd be ready. I barely slept. Every sound outside rattled through me. Every passing headlight made me think the man from earlier had returned. But the photographs of the passports and ledger sat on my phone like a pulse, steady and undeniable. Proof. Leverage. The first real grip I'd had on the truth since everything broke open. Around 5 a.m., my phone buzzed again, Another message from the unknown number. We need to talk before you make this worse. Do not involve your sister. Do not involve anyone. That last line forced a cold wave up my spine. He knew Sarah was working his flight. He shouldn't have known that. A second message arrived immediately. If she says something, I can't protect her. My breath stopped. Protect her from what? From whom? At sunrise, I drove straight to the airport, not to confront him, not yet, but to speak to someone on the inside. Someone who would know if a passenger on an international flight was dangerous or flagged. My sister's airline badge had introduced me to a few people over the years, and I prayed one of them was on shift. I found Marquez, a customer service lead Sarah was close with, standing behind an empty counter near the international gates. His expression softened when he saw my face. "You okay?" "No," I said. "I need to ask about a passenger on this morning's Paris flight." He checked the roster. "Name?" I hesitated. I didn't know which one to give. I finally said, "The man in 4A, he's traveling with a woman in 4B." Marquez typed for a long moment, then frowned. "That seat's assigned, yeah, but security flagged the passport at boarding." He lowered his voice. "Not enough to stop him, nothing concrete, but enough to notify the receiving airport. They'll pull him the moment he lands." My pulse quickened. Good, good. There was a chance this would end before he even set foot on French soil. But then Marquez added, "Thing is, they didn't flag 4A, they flagged 4B." I blinked. "The woman," he nodded. "Her passport set off an international alert. Serious crimes. They're expecting her in Paris." That didn't make sense. My sister had watched them board together. The woman had been holding his arm, leaning into him like she belonged there. But if she was the one flagged, why had the man in my house been searching for something connected to him? I felt something shift, something subtle but seismic. "What about the third seat?" I asked. 4C. Marquez looked again. "Empty, no one booked it. But I found a boarding pass for it, printed, with his handwriting on it." He shook his head. "Then he printed it himself. Airlines don't issue a third seat unless it's purchased through the system." I stepped back, dizzy. He had created a fake boarding pass for a fake passenger, a ghost. I drove home in silence, fogged by a growing dread I couldn't articulate. I walked into the bedroom, grabbed the cylinder from the dirt again, and emptied it completely, checking every corner. That's when I found it tucked beneath the folded passports, a single Polaroid photo I had somehow missed before. My hands trembled as I lifted it. It wasn't of him. It wasn't of me. It was my sister. Standing on a jet bridge in her Delta uniform, smiling, unaware the picture was being taken. On the back, in the same handwriting as the note on the boarding pass, were 4 words: "She is the package." My throat closed. My knees nearly gave out. The third seat wasn't for a person, it was for what he was delivering. And the woman in 4B wasn't his partner. She was his handler. My sister was the target. This wasn't about money laundering. This wasn't about forged documents. He had used me to get close to her. He had used my marriage, our home, our life as cover. And now she was trapped in a metal tube over the Atlantic with them. I didn't feel fear anymore. I felt something colder, clearer, sharper than anything I had ever known. I wasn't just planning revenge now. I was planning a rescue. I drove straight to the airport again, not thinking, barely breathing, clutching the Polaroid like it might burn through my fingers. I needed someone, anyone, who could tell me how deep this went and why Mark had wrapped his entire life around mine just to get within arm's reach of my sister. I didn't care about the money anymore, or the aliases, or the man who'd broken into our home. I wanted the reason, the real one, the one that would make sense of the months, years, he'd spent pretending to love me. There was only one person I could think of who might know: Detective Leland, the officer who'd first mentioned the aliases. I called her and told her to meet me in the employee lot, where cameras didn't reach every corner and no one asked questions after shift changes. She arrived fast, stepping out of her cruiser with her badge tucked into her jacket. "Why here? You should be somewhere safe." I didn't have the energy for preamble. I held out the Polaroid. Her eyes narrowed. "Where did you get this?" "From a document tube my husband buried in our backyard," I said. A tube full of fake identities and offshore transfers. But this was hidden deeper, like it mattered more. My voice shook. Why would he photograph my sister and label her the package? She studied the photo for a long time, too long. When she finally spoke, her tone had changed, flatter, colder. You need to sit, she said. No, tell me now. She drew a slow breath. 6 years ago, your sister wasn't just a first officer, she was a whistleblower. You know that, right? I frowned. She reported a maintenance irregularity. She did everything by the book, they cleared her. Because she was right, Leland said. She exposed a smuggling pipeline running through 3 domestic carriers. A ring that used legitimate flight crews to move illegal tech out of the country. The people she exposed didn't go to jail. They went underground. They rebuilt. I started shaking my head. That was years ago, she told me it was handled. It wasn't handleable, Leland said, her voice low. She made enemies, very patient ones. The world tilted. So they targeted her now? No, Leland said. Not now, then. They started looking for ways to get close before the dust even settled. She held up the Polaroid. This photo, it's old, at least 4 years. She didn't know she was being watched. My stomach dropped. And Mark, the detective's silence told me everything. He was placed, I whispered. The words felt thick and metallic, scraping my tongue. He didn't fall in love with me. He didn't stumble into my life. He was sent. Leland nodded. They needed a non-crew member who could move unnoticed through the parts of your sister's life she didn't share with the airline. Family gatherings, personal routines. Things only a relative would have access to. I felt my knees lock. So I was the access. You were the asset, she said. They embedded him to get close to her indirectly. Using you gave him a legitimate reason to be near her without raising suspicion. I pressed my hand over my mouth, but the scream stayed trapped inside. Every memory, every smile, every shared meal, every quiet night recoiled into something sinister. Every gesture of comfort had been strategy. Every kindness had been leverage. I hadn't married a man. I had married an operation. Why now? I forced out. Why take her now? What changed? Leland hesitated, then delivered the final blow. She's testifying next month, a closed federal hearing. Someone leaked her name. They know she's about to expose the second network. They're taking her before she can. My legs nearly folded. My husband, my not husband, had lured her onto that flight. The woman beside him wasn't the threat. He was. My pulse hardened into something icy and controlled. What do I do now? I whispered. Leland met my eyes, and for the first time I saw fear in hers. You stop thinking like a victim, she said. And you start thinking like someone who knows exactly how he operates. Use what he taught you, even if he never meant to. I nodded, tears burning but refusing to fall, because I finally understood the reason. He betrayed me not for money, not for love, not for escape. He betrayed me because I was the doorway to my sister. And now that I knew the truth, I only had one path left, get ahead of him, and destroy him. I didn't wait for a task force or an international alert to spool up. My sister was already hours over the Atlantic with 2 people who had spent years building a way to get close to her. By the time they landed in Paris, whatever plan they had was going to unfold fast and clean. I couldn't afford slow. I couldn't afford careful. I needed to weaponize the one thing my husband never expected. That I would stop being the quiet shadow in his life and become the thing that cornered him. I drove straight home, retrieved the cylinder from the dirt one final time, and laid everything out on the kitchen table. Passports, ledger, Polaroid, every piece of the life he had hidden from me. I photographed each document again under better lighting, then organized the files into a digital packet, and attached it to an automated email timed to deliver in 6 hours to the FBI Field Office, the FAA Internal Investigations Unit, Interpol, and Sarah's Airlines Security Division. If he succeeded in whatever he was planning before wheels touched down in Paris, his world would erupt in a blaze the moment my evidence hit those inboxes. If he failed, he'd be heading into custody with the full weight of his own secrets collapsing under him. Either way, his future was already burning. But the real revenge wasn't in sending the evidence. It was in what I did next. I opened a new message to the number he'd been texting me from. I found everything. I buried nothing. Talk to me when you land, alone. She'll be safe if you come to me directly. If you run, the packet goes out early. A lie. But he didn't know that. Mark had spent years studying me, manipulating me, shaping me into a version of myself that fit his mission. He still thought I was predictable. He still thought fear made me obedient. He still thought I was his asset. Predictability was my weapon. I hit send. The minutes crawled. My body hummed with adrenaline that made my vision grainy. At 10:41 a.m., the reply came. Meet me, no police, no games. I'll tell you everything, don't hurt her. I felt nothing. Not triumph, not panic, just a cold, centered clarity. I sent him an address, an abandoned trucking depot on the south side of Charlotte, the same place he once told me he used to clear his head on long drives. I chose it because I knew it was familiar to him, but more importantly, because the staging yard behind it fed directly into a secure access freight corridor. A corridor monitored by airport security. A corridor my sister's airline used. And a corridor I knew exactly how to access from years of picking her up from late-night shifts and listening to her rant about badly designed employee shortcuts. I arrived at the depot first, parked behind a stack of rusted containers, and watched emptiness settle across the cracked pavement. Every nerve in me vibrated. My phone showed the aircraft's descent pattern. 23 minutes until they landed. 15 minutes later, a black sedan rolled in. He stepped out, not the husband I knew. Not the man who grilled ribs or kissed me goodnight. His posture was coiled, alert. His eyes scanned the yard before locking onto my car. When he walked toward me, his expression was almost calm, like he still believed he could talk his way out of this. I stepped into view holding one thing, the Polaroid of my sister. The moment he saw it, something flickered in his eyes. Not guilt, not shame, calculation. I spoke before he could. You used me to get to her, I said. My voice didn't shake. You built a life out of lies so you could stand close enough to touch her without anyone suspecting. You broke into my house. You let a man pull a gun on me. And now you're taking her off that plane for something she blew the whistle on 6 years ago. He didn't deny it. He didn't even blink. Instead, he said quietly, you weren't supposed to find that photo. That was the closest thing to a confession I was ever going to get. I took one step back, the signal I had rehearsed in my mind all morning. Behind him, 3 unmarked vehicles surged through the freight corridor gate, lights off, engines low and fast. Airport security and federal agents swept in with a precision that made the air vibrate. He spun too late, his hand barely brushing his waistband before he was tackled hard to the ground. His handler, the woman from 4B, was intercepted on the jet bridge the moment the cabin door opened. My sister was escorted off separately, pale and trembling but alive. The system he had served for years collapsed in a single coordinated sweep, not because he slipped, not because his network failed, but because I turned on him with everything he built to control me. Hours later, when Sarah finally saw me outside the customs office, she broke down sobbing, clutching my jacket like she might fall without it. I held her and felt every muscle in my body unclench for the first time since the phone call where this all began. My life is quieter now, strange, empty in places I'm still learning how to fill. The house feels different without his presence, but not in the way I expected. It feels honest. I sleep with the lights off again. A federal agent told me last week, he underestimated you. Maybe he did, but the truth is simpler. He taught me to survive by studying danger. He just never imagined the danger would become me.